This is the Trading Psychology Podcast. This is VP, creator of No Nonsense Forex and author of the book No Nonsense Forex Trading Psychology. And with me, as he is every week, it is the king of Northern Utah. It's Rob Reinhold.
Thank you very much. And yes, I'm about to build my moat. So get ready for some travel issues in that area. Now, it's good to be here. Again, absolutely loving talking about psychology. I have spent the last 15 years just diving into every single thing I can about learning about the human brain, how we work, all the hormones that go around in our system, and how we make decisions. It is absolutely fascinating. And I never thought that this was the part about trading that I would need to master. I always thought it was the charts. I always thought, I just need to master the charts. Problem is, I couldn't do it all the time. Learning psychology is where you will become a pro at this.
And speaking of pro, always remember, we don't bring it up too much anymore because we figure most of you already know. But every episode is brought to us by Maverick Trading. All links are down below. If you just want to go check out Rob's Flat Earth Trading YouTube channel, very cool, a really good place to learn a lot of things we're talking about right now and actually see it in action. And if you actually want to go pro with the greatest prop firm, all the links are down there as well. Now, moving on to this episode, and it's going to be a branch off of the ego episode we just did. If you haven't figured out by now, we're kind of taking slivers of things we spoke about in the past and taking those topics and isolating them and then drilling down even further. Because at the very least, I feel like we're going to be talking about encounters that you have probably had in your trading at some point, so you can definitely relate to it. But then there's a whole new set of solutions that proliferate from this as well. So with the validation episode, we're not even going to really get to the crux, to the problem at hand until later in the episode. What I really want to do early on here, Rob, is talk about the importance of validation, especially for males. I know we have some females that listen to this show too. Maybe this does apply to you, but I do know for the most part, if you were to ask somebody to be completely honest and say, hey, what would you rather have? If there are only two choices, would you rather have a lot of money and not a lot of respect? Or would you rather have respect and not a lot of money? I think the majority of people would choose the latter. I know for myself, growing up, I would have absolutely chose the latter. I mean, people know me pretty well here, and they also don't know, well, they also know that I'm pretty private and I don't like to overshare. So I even feel weird like talking about things like this. But when I was younger, you guys know, I approach things differently than most people do. And I strongly feel because of my ego that my way is the right way. And I would always be around people that had problems that they would talk about or ask me my opinion on. And it was just like the silliest, easily to solve problem to me. And so I would give my opinion on it. And it would make sense to them, but they would never actually take my advice. And then their problems just got worse and worse. Every once in a while, they would take my advice, and lo and behold, it was exactly what they needed to hear and exactly what they needed to do. I'm like, yes, yeah, I know, right? That's how you should approach this. But then I would give that same person advice later, and they wouldn't take it. It was just so frustrating. And everywhere I worked, I always felt like I knew the way things should run and the way things should go, but I always felt like I was on an island. And so I do know that it was so validating to me. There's two moments of validation I'm going to talk about today, but the first one was starting this YouTube channel, you know, feeling like I'm on an island again with the way I trade, but knowing that it works and knowing that if I just put it out there, other people will be able to see this too. And it did. And honestly, I felt like, man, after it was all said and done, and I was a few years in and people have seen it and it's worked and they're turning pro and it's exactly what they needed to hear and exactly what they needed to do. I'm like, you know what? If I die tomorrow, I will not die unfulfilled because I got the validation for myself that I have been looking for pretty much my entire life. That's how powerful it was for me. Rob, do you have any input on that, or do you have I'm sure you were validated in a lot of ways too, over time. Can you relate to this at all? Like, am I on an island again here, or is this actually triggering a lot of memories for you too?
Well, look, Patrick, I'm a human being, and I've definitely gone through this just like you. And so I really want to take your example that you just gave and really talk about what validation means. So you had an idea, you had a way you looked at yourself, and that was an ego. And we talked about that in the ego episode. This is your ego is what you think about yourself and the way you want other people to think about you as well. And so you had this plan and you went out and you put in time, you put in effort, you put in money, you put in blood, sweat, and tears. And we use validation as a way to check and see whether or not our actions and our efforts are being rewarded. And that's really what this validation is. And you said that, you went out there, you took a risk that not many other people would want to take. And all the things that have happened have been this validation for you that all of your time and effort and blood, sweat, and tears were worth it. That's how validation works, is it simply cements our ego. It tells us, hey, what you did, the time and effort you did was worthwhile. And that's what it's all about with validation.
Yeah, I just think it's supremely important and extremely powerful for a lot of people, especially if you just never had it for most of your life, even though you felt like you should have at some point. I feel like it's a big void in a lot of people's lives. And it was a really big moment for me when that void got closed. And so don't get me wrong. The point of this episode is not for me to sit here and pat myself on the head, the entire time. It's to mention my moments and what this one I'm about to talk about actually did to me. Because this can be really dangerous too, depending on when it happens to you. So that's the whole point. So the other validation I was going to talk about is what you were just saying, Rob, is when I put this system together. At some point, I got really frustrated with the way the entire world was trading, and I decided to break off on my own, which is ridiculous if you think about it. Because if everybody, even really smart people, are doing this a certain way, well, then it's just a matter of doing things that way and then just doing it better than everybody else. If the answer was somewhere else, somebody by now would have already come up with it. All right. And so it was a little bit of an anti-ego moment for me. And it's like, well, am I really, there's no way I can be this much of a pioneer in 2012 or 2013 whenever I started doing this. I'm like, that it really, I was doubting myself a lot when this thing first happened. And I also knew too that it was going to take a long time. So I'm like, if you're going to take a chance like this, I mean, it's going to take a while to research and discover and put together. This is a big move. Why don't you just stay with what you know and get better at this? It was a big, push and pull for me, but I went my own way and I put it together and it worked. The problem is it started working kind of right away and it worked too early. That's the big, I guess, takeaway from this episode really is I think for a lot of people, no matter when you started this game, you first learned how to trade. And for some reason, when you first learned technical analysis, lo and behold, every example they showed you worked like a freaking charm. And they showed you a trend line. Every time it broke, it went one way. Every time it rebounded, it went the other way. And you're like, wow, that's all I got to do? And in truth, trading is different. But once you start applying these things, I will bet most people listening to this right now started applying these techniques they used into real trading, demo trading, whatever it was when you actually started doing this yourself. And did it fail miserably, or did it actually work pretty well? Or did it work kind of well and you were so euphoric you just want to remember those really good times? I'll bet you it was B. I'll bet you it was actually working for you pretty well. And when that happened, it gave you this validation that you may have never had your entire life. And that void we just talked about finally closed. And the crazy cocaine-induced euphoria that something like that can produce is going to lead to nothing but a blown out account. And that's exactly what it did for me 3 times. Is this making any sense to you, Rob? Can you relate to this at all?
Probably the most common story amongst traders is that people did really, really well in a demo account, got all that confidence, all that validation, and then went out into the live market and found out it's a lot tougher in the live market than it is in a demo account. Why? Because psychology. In a demo account, there's no psychological problems to deal with, there's no fear, there's no anything. But once you get into it, it actually is tough. So again, either that is a very common story, or the other common story is that people got into trading and they went live right away and they had a lot of success early on, and then they ended up giving up all their gains because they didn't have all the skills they needed to succeed. Those are the two most common things I see. And yes, that absolutely sets people up for some real problems in trading to get that validation of you got it, you're a genius, you can make a profit, and go out there, because then you don't have all the skills to back it up.
And yeah, the only frame of reference I can use is my own system. But, people are learning somebody else's system, but they're using different variations of it that they created themselves. So that validation, I think, is even more magnified because you're not just copying somebody else's system. You're actually making it yours. And I'm telling you, Rob, I see so many comments, especially in the earlier videos, even now, of people who act like they just discovered religion. They're like, well, for the first time, I'm actually killing it. I've gotten 200%, 300% returns, all thanks to you. Thank you so much. And I get this like dagger feeling in my stomach to where I'm like, oh man, I really hope I still see you 12 months from now, because I don't think I'm going to. I think the letdown and reality hitting you is going to be so severe. And that validation that you feel like you have right now is going to be shattered later on. And how are you going to handle that? I don't know the answers to these questions, but I'm dreading them every time I see this. I want to congratulate them, but I'm not going to congratulate them because I know this isn't going to last. And I know the come down is going to be freaking brutal.
Whenever someone tells me they made 200% in a short period of time, I want to take the other side of all their trades going forward, because what that tells me is that they were, number one, over position size. They were trading way too large to make. If you could make 200% in a month, you were wildly over position sizing. And I know that once you get a statistical guarantee of 4 or 5 losers in a row, your account's at zero. That's how it works if you do too much in every single trade. Look, it's just like rolling dice. There is a period of time where you will roll the same number 3 times in a row. That is a statistical guarantee. It's not very likely, but it is going to happen. When that happens, you're guaranteed to lose. So yeah, whenever I hear someone that had all the success and they give me really high returns, I know that they are a flash in the pan and they don't have the skills to make it long term.
Yeah, so for those of you listening at home, you've probably heard us talk about these types of things before. But the reason I put this episode together is because I really feel like validation is at the core of a lot of it. And it's something we haven't really touched on that much, because for me, it was such a powerful thing and such a life-changing event for me once I finally got it for real. Because I just know for me, there was life before it was one way and life after it was a completely different way. So I know how important that middle part is, especially transitioning people from a world where they don't feel like they ever get validated for their thoughts and opinions and beliefs to a world where they do. Such a big difference. And you can achieve that through trading. And if you have it too early, you think you have it, but you actually don't. I don't want to see people out there get completely crushed and not want to jump back into trading. Because like you said, Rob, most people listening to this show right now had early success. I think if people had early failure, they might immediately think, oh, well, this is a crock of shit. Everything this person taught me isn't even real. Why did I waste my time? And then they move on. It's usually the people that had that success early that got this false validation turned into the lifers that we see in front of us right now, for better or for worse. So the big question is, and this is where I want you to come in, Rob, because you're so good with stuff like this. What are the solutions? If we got validated too early and we're still chasing that high, what are some things we can do to prevent ourselves from doing that? Because there's all that direction only leads one way, and it's not good.
Well, the solution to this is actually fairly simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. We are really bad as human beings to tying our, quote, success to monetary results. And that's where you really need to just change that. We have no control over the monetary results of any trade you take or any series of trades you take. There's so many things that are out of your control. Market conditions, volatility, so many things are outside of your control. When you start to tie validation to your financial numbers, you're setting yourself up for some real failures down the line. So when we first get into trading, we say, oh, my ego, and again, how I look at myself and how I want other people to look at me, especially if like your family isn't completely behind what you're doing. I told the story of how my dad wasn't on board with what I was doing. He's like, yeah, you got to go to college. So when this trading thing doesn't work out, you'll have something to fall back on. So when you're putting yourself out there, when people are watching you to see if you have success, boy, that is a lot riding on that ego of yours. And if you use monetary gain as your validation, and remember, validation is the confirmation that what you're doing, the time and effort, blood, sweat, and tears that you're putting into this is worth doing. When you tie it to money, you're just asking for trouble. Yes, you might have some good periods. What are you going to do in the bad periods? So you need to completely change your reward mechanism for validation. Change those to non-monetary events. Change it to things like, I'm trying to achieve a certain win-loss percentage this month. I'm trying to achieve a certain profit factor this month. I'm trying to do certain things. My goal is this month, I'm not going to deviate from my plan once, because last month I did it once. This month, I'm not going to do it at all. Do you see when you start to tie the payoff, the validation, to things you actually have control over, then you can get the validation you're looking for, and it can be a constant stream of validation, because validation is a very positive thing. If you don't get validation, you're not going to work as hard going forward because you didn't get the validation. So the secret is tie, quote unquote, success to things you actually have control over.
And I would just push back a little and say that, you don't really have a lot of control over what you do month to month. But I know exactly what you're saying. And it kind of ties into the other solution that we have written down here. And this is something we've talked about a lot. If you can tie your own validation, not to your end result on your P&L sheet, but to how well you actually followed your system. And you're like, well, VP, that's really boring. Yeah, but I think by now, you also know just how hard it is to do and how it would vault you into this rarefied air stratosphere if you are somebody who can actually follow a system despite all of the obstacles that we have just spent 55 episodes on a podcast talking about, and we haven't even hit them all yet. Like, despite all of those things coming at you, you can still follow your system to the letter. That is an extraordinary goal. And being able to do that in anything in life is going to take you really far, because like I said, you become not everybody else by being able to do something like this. That to me is a goal really worth chasing. And what's kind of cool and kind of not cool about it is it's one of those things that just takes almost a lifetime to master. I'm not completely there yet myself. I'm certainly closer than most. Rob, I don't know about you, the king of flat earth trading over here, but it's something that can give you validation, yet the game is still not over. You can play this game your entire life just trying to stick to your own created system, as simple and as absurd as that even sounds. I think that's the game we should be playing.
I agree with you 100%. I've always said when trading gets boring, you're finally doing it right. And I got to share with everybody one of the comments I got after one of the videos of Flat Earth Trading Society. So we are on like video number or trade number 45 in Flat Earth Trading Society. And again, we're flipping coins, we're throwing darts, we're choosing random positions in random methods. We're putting no effort into the entry whatsoever. Whatever trade it is, we just buy it at the market that second. We don't even look at a chart. And then we do a trailing stop, where if it goes against us, we sell it. And if it goes for us, we hold it as long as we possibly can. And somewhere around trade 40, I got a comment on one of the videos I love. And it said, "Hey, Rob, this is getting really boring. Is there any way you could spice it up a little bit?" And I just laughed and I answered, that's the point of this entire experiment, is to show how boring it can be. Now, here is some good news. I have been trading now for 26 years, 27 years. I'm still excited every single Sunday. It used to be Monday, but now that I've traded Forex since 2007, I'm excited every week because the market is dynamic. The market is always changing. Now look, it's weird because it's always the same. The market's always the same. Things go up and down and sideways, and volatility goes up sometimes and down sometimes. But it's so interesting. I am still excited and fascinated for every week that I get to do this career. But I do the same damn thing every single week that I've done for years. So yes, it is boring, but it's also very exciting as well. So to wrap this episode up, validation is really important. You need it. In order for you to justify the time and effort you are putting into this business, you must receive validation. Now, this validation can be from your trading results, the numbers. It could be from people that are watching you do this. They see, oh, he's still doing this after 4 or 5 months. Oh, there must be something to it. Validation is going to come in all forms. But tie the validation to things you can actually control. That's really the key to this, because then if you screw up something that you could have controlled, you're going to get pain. You're going to get not validation. You're going to get a slap on the wrist. And hopefully next month or next week, that encourages you to actually control it. Then once you do control it, you're going to get the validation, and it's going to get you to be motivated to go after the next hurdle. And once you knock down these hurdles one by one, all of a sudden, there's no more hurdles that would knock down. Yes, trading gets a little bit boring, but it becomes a lot easier at that point. So validation is very key. Just tie it to things you can actually control.
And on that note, everybody, we would like to thank you for joining us here at the Trading Psychology Podcast. Rob and I will both be back with you next week.
Goodbye, everybody.